So maybe we should introduce some of the audience questions. I was struck by watching a YouTube clip of Rinpoche talking about cultural forms and some of the Eastern forms of Buddhism in relationship. Especially, I'm very interested in the student-teacher relationship. So one question here is Mitra, Shastri, Rinpoche, Roshi, how does Western culture, society relate to Eastern form? And I'm guessing since they use these titles, they're talking specifically about the forms of the teacher. Do we move away from these Eastern titles? If not, why?
I think this is a real key issue in our practice. And I'm very conscious of what Mark has said about surrender. I do value that very much. And yet I think that for me, the practice has been about dissolving the transference, if you'll forgive me for using psychological terminology. Continually bringing the student back to the friend that Rinpoche talks about in his book, the spiritual friend, and not the master, the Zen master, which is, I never use that term, but that's actually what my name means. But it's too top down. It's too hierarchical, and it stops the student from intimacy and really asking the question they need to ask, or teaching the teacher what the teacher needs to learn. So the idea of a Zen teacher in particular, in my lineage, has shifted a great deal for me and for my colleagues. I'm not the only one that feels this way, but it's constantly reminding the student of their Buddha nature and of the equality of our endeavor of bodhicitta.
Okay.
You never know which ones to go to.
Yeah. I guess the robed persons have to talk more or something. Well, I think title really doesn't matter, in my view. No matter what title we adopt, it will carry some underlying, cultural connotation. If we cannot redefine the title. And especially in English, in some sense, it's nice to adopt new terms. That's the nature of English language, I think, isn't it? Always adopting new terms from, different culture, we have many like French terms and Latin, all these, it comes from all these. There's a richness, and many Indian terms are also adopted. And some Tibetan terms are also appearing in Oxford and Webster's and dictionaries like Lama, right, and stuff like that. And so I think if we can redefine the nature of teacher-student relationship, which is the key, and the meaning of the titles, then sometimes it's nicer to have a new term than using some old terms, I think. That's one thing. The other thing is I truly agree with Roshi's point about the friendship that is so crucial for teacher-student relationship. And it's not really about hierarchy, or it's not about establishing some kind of empire of any teacher, lineage, or organizations, but it's about relating with one another as a basic, human being, a practitioner on the path of awakening, sharing the same goals, sharing the same desire, and how can we help each other. And one of my teachers told me in the beginning that the real point when you begin to learn is when you start teaching. So from that time on, actually, teaching became much easier for me, because then I take this as a class for myself. I'm not really teaching someone, but I'm also learning. We're all learning together. And so really that's the whole point. And I think we all need to know there's this, the friendship that is the key, and also the view that we're all learning together. We're all walking on this path together. And maybe I know a little bit more sometimes. It's like a tour guide, The tour guide has been to India many times. In my case, I was born there. And so once you've been to a certain place many times, then you can take some group there, right? And you can bypass a lot of trouble with a tour guide. The tour guide will make sure you have a safe water and, safe hotel and nice orientation and so on. So teacher's job is really like guiding a tour group, to this place called awakening.
I think this is very interesting question because American society is such that we don't really have a lot of respect for the process of teaching, which we can see from the level of how school teachers are treated, etc. But at the same time as we have that, we also have this celebrity culture that puts people on pedestal for all the wrong reasons. So it's been interesting for me since I got my title this summer to just study what that's like. And people do listen a little bit more, which is interesting. And they ask more questions, which is also interesting. But I think, we do have to face the fact when people say, why do you put a teacher on a pedestal? It's like, well, let's face it, there's about 1,000 times as many people right now in the world who care what the cast of Jersey Shore thinks about things than what Ponlop Rinpoche or Roshi think about things. So we're already putting people on a pedestal. And then we say, well, why do we do that? And at the same time, I was telling Rinpoche when I got to interview him for the ID Project podcast that after I really started studying Buddhism and developed a relationship with the guru, which became very strong right after college, I wanted to go back to my college professors and apologize. And it's also interesting to be a part-time college professor and have students argue grades. And I'm like, we're studying Buddhism here. Arguing a grade in a Buddhism class is interesting. What are you doing here? So I do think that I do think that as much as we want to equalize everything, we do have to realize that the aspect of putting somebody up on a pedestal is very much part of our culture. This is where I get a little provocative and say, who do you really want walking down the red carpet? Brad Pitt or Rinpoche? Seriously, how would you arrange your society? And
Brad Pitt.
Brad Pitt, yeah. We just need to get you in a movie. Just don't play a serial killer. I don't think that's good.
Right. That's right.
Be provocative.
Vampire.
Yeah, vampire. By the way, if any of Rinpoche's students could talk to him about the shows he likes True Blood and Dexter. Very violent.
I think my red robe's doing something.
He was hiding when we were walking outside. He couldn't be in direct sunlight.
There's an aspect of, not Dexter or the vampire show that I wanted to comment on that last point. We're in a process of translation, always, I think. And this issue or question of titles and how that applies is a very dynamic one, and I think that it speaks to each of the points that have been that have been made, that somehow one has to, as the example that Rinpoche gives of the two vessels, how do we transfer the essence from one vessel to another with integrity? And that's a negotiated process. And so the expression of titles and having to walk with those and work with those is, I find, to be a very dynamic process. I think I resonate with what you were saying, Ethan, being cognizant of being appointed to a certain position. There's an automatic reflection of oh, that's a lot of responsibility. Am I up to that? What it becomes, just as Rinpoche was saying, it becomes such it potentiates one's path as well, because then you're carrying your own projections about what it means to be to hold a certain title, or to think of oneself. For instance, I have a very hard time thinking of myself as a teacher in any way, but I can feel quite natural in interaction, and I can also regard myself as a student in learning the way that Rinpoche, you were talking as being a teacher, taking it in as a part of my path. That feels very natural and authentic.